Alive on the ManOnMounjaro, it's OnThePen Alive, with your host David Knapp.
I'm here, I swear. Thank you, Claptrack, and happy Thursday night. Welcome to OnThePen Live. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, ManOnThePen. Not using trademarks anymore because we're afraid of losing our accounts. ManOnMounjaro, that's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Compound, that pen. That's why you're here, and we're here to talk about our journeys. We're here to share community. We're here to enjoy each other because you know what? Community is the best part of this journey, and I would say it is the indispensable part of this journey. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's good to see you here tonight. Natalie, Spoonie, Corey, Folly, Anna, Sue the Dude, Rudy, welcome. Good to have you here. Thank you for being members of the channel. You all make this thing go round. Of course, Tammy, Shorty, Linda, Mimi, J-Neb, Natalie, Karen. Really, really appreciate all of you being here tonight and cannot wait to share the next hour with you. We've got a great show for you tonight. We had Dr. Daniel Rosen, who you may remember from an OTP past. He was a guest on one of the favorite episodes. When people tell me about their favorite episode of OnThePen, so many times they're like, it's the Dr. Rosen episode because he was so insightful. And he was so insightful in this interview also, and actually talked about a topic that has not been talked about anywhere on the internet. And I was like, this is like maybe the type of topic that you kind of want to run away from sometimes if you're trying to protect. But honestly, I felt like this was the perfect thing to bring to you because he's a doctor. He sees it all. Oh, of course, the light is acting up. He's a doctor. He's seen it all, and he's got to deal with everything. And so he's going to talk about how he, in his practice, deals with slow or low responders to GLP-1 medications, amongst other things. But that was the most interesting thing to me. So I'm excited to bring that to you tonight. Of course, we've got our maintenance minute with our friend Corey, who has been bringing us a little bit of information about what it's like to be in GLP-1 maintenance, some of the things to consider. If that is you and you are in maintenance, put maintenance in the chat. Would love to hear from you. The light is it's convinced that it's going to give somebody a seizure tonight. So let's just, I found the easiest way to fix it is just, see? It's kind of like the old school Nintendo games where it would flash on the screen. You'd pop that bad girl out. You'd give her the what for, you'd pop her back in, maybe you'd put it back in, blow on it, and then game on, right? That I guess this light is sort of cut from the same cloth as the old Nintendo video games. But what a great show we have in store for you tonight. We got a rhythm, a rhyme, a routine kind of here. So let's get into a little bit of housekeeping. Housekeeping. Yeah, not a ton for the housekeeping this week, to be totally honest with you. It's been a wild week, and we'll get into it a little bit here before we bring Dr. Daniel Rosen, our hot channel, in. It's been a week. But the thing that I wanted to give you an update was on the book. We are 90% of the way done. I'm super curious how many of you out there are the type of person who starts a project, right? You get going. The project is going good, and you really push really hard. You give it your all, and you get 90% of the way done. And then it's like the last 10% takes you 90% of the time to complete it. It is just like that is this way with the book for me. I've got a bunch of stories from people that I want to infuse in the book, but I had already written the book and I've never written a book before. And now I want to infuse these stories. And how do you do that? And then how do you make sure everything is cited correctly so you don't get sued? Because you don't want that to happen. So there's just a lot of things to consider, but that's the phase that we're in. And I'm still I'm committed to getting this done, even if I have to take a couple of weeks off from doing the show to get this thing done. But we're going to do what we have to do because I think that it is 100% important to get this out before the holidays, because this is such an important, I think, message to get out to everybody. So yeah, Deborah, it's good to see you. Haven't seen you here for a while. So thank you for being here, unless you have a different screen name that pops up sometimes. So yeah, thank you all for being here. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button. That's the number one thing we got to do here. But that's the update. I just wanted to give you an update on the book and just let you know it's still a thing. We're still working on it. I do want to say before I forget to do it, we have a wonderful, wonderful sponsor here at OnThePen. Listen, if you are facing losing access to Tirzepatide, we're going to get into that here in a minute. It's never been more important to have an advocate that's fighting for you on the insurance side. I can't even tell you how many stories I heard this week from people who are like, my PCP, my endocrinologist, they aren't fighting the good fight for me to get these medications covered. They're not doing a whole lot of favors for me in the prior authorization department. What do I do? Well, our friends at Roe, I cannot recommend these people more. And people are always like, why Roe? It's because they're good people. They're just good people. I would never align myself with a company that I didn't firmly and fervently believe in. I waited a long, long time, and I said no to a lot of people before the right thing came along. And honestly, the thing that makes it work is that it's a inverse of what everybody else is doing. Everybody else is advocating for a company to you. I am advocating to the company for you. And so it's like a mirror image. So I communicate to Roe on behalf of the community and say, listen, this is what the community needs. These are the tools that would be helpful. These are the things that we need to do and implement. And so I get to be a voice for the community to Roe instead of me being a voice to the community for Roe. So I just love Roe. If you, and the reason that I bring this up right now is because so many people are struggling to maintain access because of the uncertainty about Tirzepatide. Well, guess what? There's other options. There's branded options, and Roe will fight the good fight for you. So check out their Roe Body program. Members of the Roe Body program lost a good amount of weight, 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year when combining with diet and exercise. You can check it out at roe.co/OTP. All the information is going to be there to join the Roe Body program. And again, they're going to fight that fight for you with the insurance companies to try to get the medicine covered for you. They're going to do all the things. Of course, if you're going to start any new medication, it's super, super important that you understand what you're getting into. And so all that information is available on their website too. If you go to roe.co/OTP, type that into your browser. It's just a couple clicks away from all the information that you're ever going to need. And it's such an it's frictionless. That's the big thing that I think is so important about getting access to care, is that it should just be frictionless. It should be easy. It shouldn't be a pain-filled process, and nobody does it better than Roe. So please check them out. So that said, there is so much to get into. And honestly, I'm going to roll the bumper to give myself a minute to compose myself, because this has been a wild week. It has been a wild 7 days. If you've been following OnThePen, you know that we've been bringing the news to you about the shortages, about compounded medication, about all that stuff. We're going to get into it tonight. We're going to just call this the What's Fresh for tonight. But, we got to do the thing. So about a week ago, Well, let's rewind the clock about 2 months ago. About 2 months ago, Eli Lilly decided, you know what? All of our medication is available. And the thing that I struggled with was that you all told me, no, it's not. It's not available. In fact, even for myself, during that time, I had to call around to a lot of different pharmacies. I ultimately found my medication, but I was dealing with it also. I've been trying to piece together why this is. And I think I have a theory as to what is going on here. I won't get super deep into what I think is going on here, but it was around the time that the Supreme Court the Supreme Court ruled on in a case. If you want to Google it and look it up for yourself, it's the Chevron case. We've talked about it a little bit over here, and I don't want to bore you with legal stuff. But essentially what it did was it stripped away federal agencies' ability to interpret vaguely written law. So they passed this thing down. And as soon as it passed, and, I didn't necessarily make this connection in real time, but very quickly after, this is interesting. All of a sudden, the FDA could be challenged in court on how they interpret what constitutes a shortage. And all of a sudden, Eli Lilly is just saying, all of our stuff's available. We're good to go. So essentially what happens over the next couple of months is they continue to report that all of their medications are in stock and commercially available, which, again, you told me, no, it's not. So I put a lot of pieces together, and of course I have a lot of friends in the media. I've got a lot of connections that I've made over the last couple of years doing this. It's not a flex. It's just I know and am plugged into this in a way that I don't know that any other creator that's making content about this stuff is. It's just the reality. It's crazy. It's crazy, right? It's not a brag. It's not a humble brag or a flex. It's just the reality. I'm plugged into a lot of people who know how to run this stuff down. So last week when a article came out, was leaked on Reddit, which of course I'm not an idiot. I know that something that comes from Reddit is not gospel truth, that it needs to be vetted, but I passed it along the channels. And when we didn't get immediate responses from the FDA saying this is not us, it told me everything I needed to know, especially since what the purported email contained was in lockstep with the verbiage that Eli Lilly was sharing. And so I felt an obligation, not a desire to get clicks, not a desire to do anything, but to bring good information to people so that they could make decisions about what they were going to do over the course of the next few days, because October was right around the corner. And in this letter, it had essentially said, this was a letter to somebody who had written the FDA about the shortage. I'll throw it up on the screen because I still have it. They said, we're reporting the shortage. What's going on? And they're like, hey, shortages are not always in the control of the manufacturer because there's cold storage and there's distributors and there's all this stuff that we've been talking about on the pen. You can go back literally 2 years ago. We were talking about how the shortage works. But then they left this little snippet at the bottom that says, once we resolve the shortage in October, we can add similar language to the standard responses. This stuff in italics was supposed to be copied and pasted into this email response. This was not. And so when the FDA did not come out and immediately say this was not ours, it told me everything that I needed to know, because I had plenty of people running down this information on behalf of the community. And so I brought that information to you. I brought it to the community, and some people who didn't brush me off, some people who knew that I was coming from a good place and didn't listen to the scores of affiliate marketers out there who were saying, hey, it's clickbait, it's this and that. They went and they stocked up. And then, of course, what happened? Well, you know what? I'll just tell you. By playing the video that I put out today after the dust has settled. Essentially what happened is the FDA removed Tirzepatide from their master shortage list, essentially ending the shortage of Tirzepatide. And this is the video that I recorded this morning for the community. Earlier this year, the community, we, us, together, launched a viral campaign called Release the Vials. At that time, we were imploring Eli Lilly to release Tirzepatide in a different presentation. Jettison the pens for the sake of getting as much safe branded medication into the hands of as many patients as possible. Earlier this year, we heard from Eli Lilly that they were going to do just that. They released the vials. They released the 2.5 and 5 milligram vials. And they even released them with a cash pay price going direct to consumer and cutting out the PBMs in an absolutely unprecedented move. Today, we are calling on Eli Lilly to consider the hundreds of thousands of people that are affected by the fact that the FDA has just restricted in one fell swoop 503B pharmacies' ability to mass produce copies of this medication. We're calling on you to hashtag release all the vials. And not only release all the vials, the upper doses of Tirzepatide, but release them at a price point that is at least reasonably comparable to what people were paying for compound. There are hundreds of thousands of people today who are fearful, who are extremely anxiety ridden because they have benefited from your drug, a drug that you created, a drug that is life-changing, game-changing. People no longer have to fight and white knuckle against their biology to get to the healthy weight that they deserve to be at. And that's thanks to you. But because hundreds of thousands relied on compound medications, whether it was for accessibility or price, they're left today in a panic. And we're asking that you release all the vials, release them at a price point that allows patients to get the drug at a reasonable cost comparable to what they were paying for compound, and throw a lifeline to the people who today are so fearful of the future. We eagerly and expectantly wait to hear you, Eli Lilly. We want to hear from you. What is your plan? How are you going to help these people? These are stories that matter. Tens of thousands members of the OnThePen community, and we eagerly await your response. So that was my response to Eli Lilly, and they're basically declaring to the FDA that the drug is off of FDA shortage, and then the FDA concurring with them yesterday. Which for the record, I don't want to get too in the weeds on this because I don't think that many people care, but I think this is 100% related to that Chevron case. I think it's 100% related to the fact that the FDA realized that they didn't want to be kneecapped on their power to interpret law, and they knew that if they fought Eli Lilly on this, that they were going to have to go to the mat and potentially lose based upon this Chevron ruling. And I think that's what's going on, just from a strictly, one guy on YouTube's perspective. But whatever the reason is, the writing has been on the wall for this for some time. Telehealths immediately are not offering. A lot of them aren't offering compound Tirzepatide immediately. Some still are. Many of the pharmacies are also saying we're not doing it anymore because that's what the law says. The law says 503A pharmacies have to stop right away. And you know where the bulk of the Tirzepatide came from is 503A pharmacies. And now if you're somebody who is sitting there saying, well, it'll just add this to it and it'll all be fine. No, it won't. First of all, 503A pharmacies cannot manufacture medications en masse. The second part is, the clinical trials for Tirzepatide do not indicate in any way, shape, or form that people need Tirzepatide plus something else mixed into it to tolerate it. Because you can take a B12 supplement just as easy, sublingual B12 just as easy. It's just, there's no doctor out there who's going to write hundreds of, if not thousands of prescriptions for a version of the medication when they know that doctors are already getting, prior to this whole thing going down, doctors are already getting cease and desist letters about this stuff. Nobody wants that. And I think there's going to be a deluge of cease and desist letters that come out, because the law is the law. The system is the system. And you don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. But we have to. The thing I feel like I'm saying repeating over and over lately is we have to live in reality here. Reality is the system. And we live within the system that we're in. So we'll see how this all shakes out, but kudos to you, the viewers of OnThePen, the loyal viewers who knew that this wasn't Dave exaggerating for clicks. This wasn't anything but my genuine, heartfelt desire to bring good information to people so that they can have more confident and competent conversations with their doctors. That's all we're trying to do here. It's all we've ever tried to do. It's what I came to YouTube for when I started this medication. And there was a deficit of information from the patient perspective. And so I efforted every day to make content about the things I was learning and bring them to you. And guess what? There's a whole bunch more that are doing it now too. And so many, and it's a huge tent. There's room for everybody because there's so many people who are getting on this medication every day. There's 190 million people with obesity or who are overweight in the United States alone. So if you think the shortages are really ending, give me a break. It's 190 million people. Do you know how many pens that is a month? 190 million times 4. That's how many pens would have to be made every month to meet the need of the United States alone. And this is a worldwide problem facing nearly 1 billion people. How many pens is that? There's nobody on earth who can manufacture enough to keep up with that. So anyway, the other thing that I wanted to jump into before we get to the maintenance minute with Corey, and guess who's got a bumper for that tonight? We're gonna get into the take out the trash together here, and this one is perfect. But I'm gonna obviously roll the bumper and then set this up for you. So one of the favorite things that I've heard over the last couple of months that just makes me want to reach through my phone and like just give the person on the other end a little, hey, how's your mother? Is this idea that the Release the Vials campaign is the reason that the shortage is over. The shortage is over because Eli Lilly said it's over. This is a self-reporting mechanism built into the FDA, and everything is so loosely written that the FDA pretty much has to just decide we agree with it or we don't. And I've already laid out the reason. It's Chevron. It's the Chevron case, why the FDA doesn't want to just go, it's not really in shortage, Lilly, and then they just go, well, let's go to court and talk about that. Because the Chevron case just said that you can't interpret loosely written law. That has to be decided in the courts. The FDA doesn't want that. They don't want it even a little bit. And I almost feel hesitant to talk about this because this is dabbling in the topics that get channels removed, but it's the reality. And I'm not going to not bring you this information, which is, another important reason that you need to find us at OnThePen.com and sign up for email alerts and join our Discord. Of course, after the show in our Discord, we continue the conversation that's happening in the chat. So you got to check that out. But we are, we're going to roll this video here because I just kind of felt compelled today to lay out why releasing more vials. First of all, Eli Lilly releasing single dose vials that circumvents the PBM is absolutely a brilliant move and one step in the right direction. Like, we can't wait on Washington, D.C. to get PBM reform. Like, if I learned anything from last week's hearing that we all watched together, it's that none of them really understand the problem. It was a bunch of Bernie Sanders basically saying, we have got the largest PBMs to agree if you reduce the price, they will not reduce accessibility to Ozempic, will you reduce the price? And what we learned in that hearing and what we knew going into it is that the PBMs take a massive chunk. I didn't realize how big, but 74% of every dollar spent on a Novo Nordisk drug goes to a PBM, a pharmacy benefit manager. If you think we're paying too much for our drugs in this country, 74% of it is going to the PBMs. We need PBM reform, a legislation that's been in the Senate for some time and not passed. They've had a chance to act on this. So if you're sitting around waiting for Washington, D.C. to make a decision on this, you're going to be waiting a long time. But what Eli Lilly did is they said, you know what, we're just going to make a play to go around the PBMs, and we're going to offer a cash pay price to our folks who are on Medicare, and we're going to offer a cash pay price to our people who are not insured. And that was the start, I think, of something that could be honestly a revolution in the way that pharmaceutical companies market their drugs to patients. And I think this could be a really net positive thing over time if this thing plays out. So I think that they will release all the vials. Release all the vials in the chat if you want to see Eli Lilly release all the vials. But this is an amazing opportunity, I think, to just educate people as to why I think that not only will releasing the upper doses of the single dose vials be, something that we should advocate for. I think it's something that they'll do. And so with that, I'll show you the clip. Lilly want to release more vials. I'm going to try to do this in 1 minute. First of all, there's a huge misconception that the release of the initial vials actually caused the medication to come off shortage. Listen, the reason the medication is coming off shortage is simply because the FDA did not want to fight with Eli Lilly that was ultimately going to end in the courts because Chevron would have them smashed into the ground and they would lose a ton of authority. So the FDA just decided we're going to go along with it. This medication is still in shortage. Regardless of what the FDA website says, we know that we can't find the medicine. There's 190 million obese patients in the US with expanding access of insurance coverage to this medication. They're never going to be able to keep up, and they're not keeping up now. Why would they release the vials? Because more sellable doses means more money to the bottom line. The fact that it's a capitalistic system is exactly why I believe they can and will release more vials. Why not gobble up that million or so people who are on compound right now by offering vials at a price point that is similar to what they've been paying for compound? So that's the reason why I think that it's very likely that you'll see Eli Lilly come in and say, like, listen, the compounds are gone, but here's branded medication and here's your option. I think we'll see it. Now, Chevron, people keep asking me, what is Chevron? So basically, I'm pulling this off the top of my head, so don't quote me on every single detail about this, but I'm going to give you just the 10,000 foot view. Basically, there were some fishermen back years ago who basically were required by a federal agency to carry certain equipment on their boat to fish, right? To legally fish off of the shores of the United States. And they were accosted by a federal agency that basically said, you don't have the right, based upon our regulations within our agency, you don't have the right equipment. And so we're going to fine you, no pun intended, a boatload of money. And so basically these fishermen had enough, and they're like, we're taking this all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court at that time ruled that the federal agency had the latitude to interpret the law and then apply their own standards to it and hold people to that standard. This past year in 2024, in this calendar year, the Supreme Court ruled on this Chevron ruling, and they basically, in my understanding, is reversed this rule and said, this is not how it's supposed to work. The federal agencies do not have the latitude to just interpret the law if it's vaguely written and just apply it how they want to. If they're doing that, that needs to be essentially adjudicated in court. So courts need to determine that. So when you think about how that could apply to the situation that we're talking about for the shortages, it's really like vague. If you read all this stuff, which I do, it's all very vaguely written. When they established the 503B pharmacies it was in 2013. It was legislation that happened in 2013. I believe this was after there was because before 2013 there was just compound pharmacies. After 2013 there was 503A and 503B. But prior to that, they were all created equal. And there was basically an outbreak in the Northeast of injectable medications that were sold compounded, and it killed a whole bunch of people. Okay. Terrible, terrible, terrible thing happened. And so in sort of happening at the same time, a lot of the active pharmaceutical ingredients for drugs in the United States were being offshored. So the Congress and the Senate were sort of looking at this going like, these pharmacies probably need to be reined in and controlled more, because they were at the time just controlled by their state boards of pharmacy. And at the federal level, they kind of go, if there's outbreaks like this happening, we'd like to have some control of that. And at the same time, they're looking and going like, wow, all these drug manufacturers are moving all of their pharmaceutical ingredient manufacturing to India and China. And like, what happens if something happens over in India and China and we can't get that stuff here? So they established in 2013 503A two classifications, 503A pharmacies and 503B pharmacies. Right? So excuse me, because I'm not reading a script here. I'm just going off the top of my head about what I've learned about this. So definitely fact check me. But 503A pharmacies were established at the time to basically exist as a pharmacy that can produce a drug for a patient who needs to have a version of a branded medication, right? So they need Tirzepatide, but let's say they're allergic to the preservative in the drug. A 503A pharmacy then has the latitude to take the active pharmaceutical ingredient and mix it up and not put that preservative in it so that the patient can tolerate the medication. Or conversely, if they need something added to it to tolerate the side effects, they can do that too. 503A pharmacies can do that regardless of whether there's a shortage or not. 503B pharmacies were established to essentially be monitored by the FDA under the current goods and manufacturing process. So the FDA goes, okay, if we're going to have a separate pharmacy to deal with shortages of medications, we want to have oversight of that. So that's where 503B pharmacies came in. And 503B pharmacies have FDA oversight over the current goods and manufacturer. And then they have the legal authority to manufacture a prescription drug that is in an FDA shortage, regardless of what the patent is and how long the patent has left on it. If it's in a FDA declared shortage, then a 503B pharmacy has the legal right to manufacture essentially a copy of the branded medication. And they can produce it in volume, so they can produce a ton of it at a time, and they don't need to hold an individual prescription to do it like a 503A pharmacy does. So where Chevron comes back into this is that if a 503B pharmacy is manufacturing a bunch of this medication to meet the shortage, again, that's the whole reason a 503B pharmacy was created by this legislation in 2013, then they have the right to make it. But where the law is vague, where the policies are vague, is in what constitutes a shortage. And what constitutes a shortage by the FDA's definition as of today is the manufacturer says so. Eli Lilly said 2 months ago, all of our drugs are commercially available. Then for the last 2 months, The FDA has told us that they were investigating and following up to ensure that that was indeed the case. And then yesterday, the FDA ruled that it's out of shortage. It took it off the master shortage list. And now the clock ticks on the 503B pharmacies, which have, according to the letter of the regulations, they have 60 days to wrap up their mass manufacturing of these medications. And 503A pharmacies have to go back to where they were before, where they're just fulfilling an individual prescription written by a doctor. It'd be Tirzepatide plus B12 or plus glycine or whatever they're adding to it to make it a compound. But where I think people are getting it wrong is doctors are not going to mass prescribe a drug that there's really not any indication for, given the many, many clinical trials that have been for Tirzepatide. Nobody drops out because of side effects, really. And so if you're relying on that, I think you can expect Eli Lilly to come after that with the full force of everything Eli Lilly has. So I've spent way more time on this than I wanted to tonight, but I do think it's apropos to do it tonight. Because I think this is a huge issue facing the community. That's what I believe. And that all of those things that I just took 20 minutes to explain are exactly why I knew when this stuff came out from Reddit that it just tracked with everything that I had been learned. So just know that I don't bring anything to this community that I don't believe is something that they need to know in order to make more competent and confident conversations with their doctors about their care. So that's what I have to say about this topic tonight. We're going to get into tonight's maintenance minute with Corey now. For those of you who are in maintenance, and then we'll get to our interview with Dr. Daniel Rosen. I have been dying to put together a bumper for this, but if you're in maintenance, drop maintenance in the chat. We're going to get our maintenance minute with Corey, and then we'll go to our interview with Dr. Daniel Rosen. Maintenance minute with Corey.
Hi, I'm Corey. All right, so you're on a GLP-1 medication for maintenance, meaning you've already done some incredible work. First off, congratulations. GLP-1 is helping you maintain your weight and manage blood sugar, but now you're ready to take it up a notch with exercise, and that's a fantastic choice. But let's not rush into anything intense. You're on maintenance, so we want to ease into this. First, you will want to clear any exercise with your personal physician. Afterward, you could start with a low-impact exercise like walking. Just 15 to 20 minutes a few times a week will help you get into a groove without overwhelming yourself. Remember, it's about consistency, not intensity. Next, let's dive into strength training and why muscle gain is so important, especially while on a GLP-1. You might be thinking, do I really need to worry about building my muscle if I'm maintaining my weight? The answer is a big yes. Muscle isn't just for athletes, it's your body's secret weapon. The more muscle you have, the more calories you burn, even while resting, making maintenance easier. Plus, as we age, we naturally lose muscle mass, which can affect our balance, mobility, and overall health. By building muscle now, you're setting yourself for a healthier, more active future. Strong muscles help prevent falls, improve mobility, and keep you independent as you age. So start with simple exercises like modified planks for core strength and lunges for your legs. For the arms, you don't need to overcomplicate it. Try bicep curls with light dumbbells or even water bottles and a few tricep dips using a chair. These are simple and effective for toning your arms and building strength. And remember, building muscle isn't just about looking good. It keeps you mobile, protects your joints, and helps with everyday activities. So if you're going to exercise, you need to fuel your body. Protein is your best friend for muscle growth, so make sure you're getting enough to eat, along with healthy carbs and vegetables to keep your energy up and help your muscles recover. And don't forget to stay hydrated. Water is essential, especially with your body adjusting to the new workouts. An exciting movement that has been happening in the GLP-1 community on TikTok is GLP-1 Strong. This began as a planks challenge from community advocate Sabrina with the hashtag GLPlanks, and it has turned into a supportive effort for beginner exercises that anyone can join in on from home with no equipment. We hope you'll join in. You've already done amazing work alongside your GLP-1 medication, and adding exercise, especially with strength-building exercises, will set you up for long-term success. Start small, stay consistent, and build a strong foundation that will benefit you now and as you age. One step at a time. You've got this. And that is your Maintenance Minute.
Corey with a amazing maintenance minute. So much good information in there. I hope you'll kind of rewind that if you're in maintenance and pick up on all. She just said so many good things in such a short amount of time. Thank you to Corey for bringing that, especially since Corey was personally impacted. Their property was personally impacted by Hurricane Helene, and she still put that together for us this week. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Corey, in the chat. Because that was super, super, super helpful. And I'm just so thankful that Corey has been willing to share a little bit about her journey and a little bit about maintenance every week here. Thank you for sharing the Maintenance Minute. Mimi, thank you for the $2 super sticker. So awesome. Thank you so much, Corey. I really, really, really appreciate you. And so happy to have you on the OTP team. That brings us to tonight's Hot Channel. And I can't wait to bring, this is a good one, guys. You're going to really, really enjoy this. So without further ado, let's bring in tonight's
Hot Channel.
Why would Eli Lilly want to release more vials?
Why would they? Why would they? I think we already talked about that. We want Dr. Rosen. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to bring in our guest for tonight. One of the most enjoyed and talked about on the Pen Lives that we've ever done was with the guest we're bringing back tonight. So tonight we're excited to welcome back Dr. Daniel Rosen, a board-certified obesity medicine specialist and bariatric surgeon, well known for bariatric surgery in the New York City area. He's a leader in the field of minimally invasive and robotic bariatric surgeries. He offers advanced treatments such as gastric bypass, sleeve gastrectomy, and duodenal switch. He's the founder of Weight Zen and has earned multiple awards for his compassionate care, including Most Compassionate Doctor. I'm sure that'll show up in his interview tonight, including the Most Compassionate Doctor honor, with a focus on providing cutting-edge, patient-centered solutions. Tonight, we welcome in our Hot Channel, Dr. Daniel Rosen. Dr. Rosen, welcome back.
He's back.
Do the clap track. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dave. It's great to see you. It's great to be back. I've been kind of quiet for the summer. I took a little social media break. Good for the soul, good for the mind, but I missed it a ton. I've been watching you. You've been crushing it. And just whenever I get the chance to see you or you come across my feed, it always gives me a little bit of pleasure. So it's great to see you and be here with you today.
Well, that's all way too kind, but the feeling is mutual. And like we were talking about before we jumped on, the TikTok world is a better place when Dr. Rosen is making content there. So I'm glad that you are willing to kind of come back. Of course, I feel like we're all a little bit like an abused puppy with TikTok. It's like, you know, we want to be there because we love it and we enjoy the community and all this, but like we it's hard to move sometimes as a creator and know what's acceptable and what's not.
Right. No one likes to get slapped down or kicked in the teeth and come back for more. For sure.
Exactly. Especially when you put so much of your heart and soul into the content that you make, and I know that you do. And so yeah, we're just glad that you're back and in action and making some content. So yeah, one of the things that I first of all, thank you so much for coming back. Like I said before, people really, really loved. I mean, it's in the top 5 episodes of people that people talk to me about. And this is the 83rd episode of this show. Or no, this would be the 84th episode.
Amazing.
So, yeah, it's like there's a lot of episodes at this point, but this is one that always seems to come back to the top as people's favorite. And I think that's because so many in the GLP-1 community are people who have also gone through some sort of bariatric procedure at some point. And so much of what you said resonates with that sector of the community. And of course, people like me who are still investigating the potential of what surgery might offer me. Dr. Rosen, tell me, like, what's kind of transpired in the bariatric world since I don't know if it's been quite a year, but it's been a good bit since you've been on. Anything new that people are talking about?
Well, I think first of all, you can't escape the fact that bariatric surgeons are talking about GLP-1 medications and the impact that these medications have had on their practices, on their pocketbooks, and on their volume. Volume is down across the board for bariatric surgeons because something new has come out, and it's something new that is effective in a way that a medication never has been effective before. So, and I've mentioned this in the past, I never took any time to invest significant knowledge into the medications that were out there prior, like phentermine, which was part of like the fen-phen combo in the 90s, or metformin, which is a diabetes kind of intro medication that some people will pitch as a first level anti-obesity drug, though I find it to be almost completely ineffective. I just never really had that be part of my practice because surgery was so many leaps and bounds ahead of the medical options at the time. And now that game has totally changed because you can be on a once a week shot and you can lose 80 pounds, 100 pounds in a year or more. I think anyone who's surfing social media has seen stories like that. So how do you convince a patient to do a invasive surgery to lose 80 pounds, 100 pounds, when there's theoretically a shot out there that can get them that without going under the knife? And while I say that these are invasive procedures, they have progressively become less and less invasive over time, going from open surgery to like laparoscopic surgery and now robotic surgery to give you improved visualization and magnification and control and ergonomics that you don't have in laparoscopy with the robotic platform and other minimally invasive things that have sort of come down the pipe. Got a siren in the background. We're always trying to help people. New York City, we got a lot of hospitals all around us, so that'll pass. And then I'm going to keep talking about sort of what's going on with bariatric surgery. So volume's down, but I think it's a temporary phenomenon because I think that the tried and true of bariatric surgery, what's so amazing is that we're only in there for a couple hours, but the changes we're able to enact can really last a lifetime. And that's very profound, especially when someone has hit a wall with their weight loss on these medications, is at the max dose and sees their weight creeping up and is like, do I want to keep doing this for the next 30 years and fight that fight, and maybe I have another 50, 60 pounds to go? I think those people will come back to bariatric surgery over time. And people talk about a larger funnel that because these medications are so viral, it's really opened up the conversation to people who in the past wouldn't have considered surgery, who now will think about it. So I think that's the biggest change, that bariatric surgeons are talking about is GLP-1s on the scene and how it's impacting things.
Yeah, that tracks with so much of what I hear just on this GLP-1 street, is that there are more people that are open to it because the dialogue has changed. I think to kind of expand out a little bit too, bariatric surgery sort of started the conversation within the greater context of society about how we treat obesity as a disease. And I think with the proliferation of GLP-1s helping people who maybe never would have even considered going under the knife, so to speak, the conversation has just ballooned up. And so I think that the stigma is starting to be reduced. It never feels fast enough, but it's starting to be reduced in the general population conversation about how we treat medicine. So over time, I think it could be very good for bariatric surgery, although the medicines will continue to evolve and get better. One of the things that I was just going to mention is, like, my own personal story is that I've not responded to these medications maybe the way that others do. I mean, we tend to just compare, but, even compared to the clinical trials, they don't do that for me. And so I think one of the interesting things is if I do make a video on YouTube, I don't really talk about my personal journey on TikTok too much. It's just I'm yelling the news at people. But on YouTube, I do sit down and I'll give an update about my own personal journey. And like I did one the other day, and it's almost has 7,000 views on it, which for YouTube, for me, that's a banger. And it's like, I think it just is indicative of the fact that I'm not alone. There are a lot of people that don't respond to these medications the way that, the videos that really get pushed out, or the news articles that really get pushed out about, hey, I lost 150 pounds, or, shoot, I've even interviewed people that have lost almost 300 pounds just on GLP-1 and diet. Right. And so the stories are crazy, but I think that there are a greater number than people let on of people that don't maybe respond to them as well.
For sure. Diabetics, in my experience, males, in my experience, people who have to lose, I would say like in the 120 pound range, they might get 40 pounds, would be before they max out, especially male diabetics. So male diabetic, 120 pounds to lose, is like a tough demographic with a significant amount of people who, are not able to get to where they want to get on the medications at the max recommended doses.
Yeah. So since you brought that up, one of the things that stuck with me and I think resonated throughout the community over the last year since you were here last time is you talked about with your patients climbing, like kind of viewing each dose escalation as a rung of a ladder and climbing those rungs slowly and sort of getting everything you can out of that dose before you do move up to the next. That really, I think, resonated with a lot of people. And I think a lot of people took that, talked to their doctors about that, and benefited from that advice. What would you say, though, to somebody who maybe for whatever reason, surgery isn't an option right now, or they've already had surgery and they've got to the top of the ladder? Like what does somebody do from there?
Yeah, it's a challenging question and clinical problem that we face. I think first of all, you have to be followed by the right kind of doctors. Someone who's comfortable with medical options and surgical options, if you are a bariatric surgery patient, is important because maybe you've had a sleeve and there are surgical options like a duodenal switch, which could help propel things to another level. There are other medical combinations you can have, like you can introduce some sort of oral medication. For some of our patients, we'll introduce Wellbutrin or bupropion into the mix. We'll add naltrexone into the mix. Phentermine, I tend not to be a huge proponent of. I tend to stick more with naltrexone and Wellbutrin or bupropion in terms of an additive medication. And then for select patients, I think you can consider super therapeutic doses or taking doses that are above the recommended max dose. And we know that if you're following a patient closely and they're having minimal side effects, on a dose of 15 to take them to a dose of 18 or a dose of 21, scratch that, take them to a dose of 17.5 or a dose of 20, either by using a second pen or because this patient's on compound versions. You can try and get additional weight loss as long as you're monitoring them closely for unwanted side effects. And I think that's relatively safe. You're only talking about a 15 to 20% increase in their total dose in terms of the medication that they are used to getting. And we know that the medication companies are running trials. We know that there's a Wegovy 5.0 that's being talked about for recalcitrant patients who aren't responding to the 2.4. We know that Eli Lilly is testing higher doses than the 15. So it's not an unreasonable proposition if you're a obesity medicine doctor to work carefully with your patients to see if increasing that dose above the top recommended dose can have some effect. But it's not something I would recommend people do on their own. It's not something I would recommend people are pursuing in a med spa, because I have seen side effects at higher doses that you typically won't see on lower doses. And let me break those down in case people are having them. And the things I've seen include skin irritation, like nerve pain or tingling, a new onset of tingling. It's called allodynia, and it's hypersensitization of the nerves of the skin, where just your clothing rubbing against the skin causes pain. I've seen that in some patients, and as we've backed off the dose, that resolved, and as we've gone back up again slower, we've seen that emerge. So there is a pretty good anecdotal, meaning like just seen in one patient, correlation in my mind between elevated doses and allodynia. You also can just see worsening constipation and exacerbation of the known side effects that we've seen on these medications. So certainly it's on a case-by-case basis, and I'm not recommending it for most patients, but if you're a doctor who's comfortable with things like that, I think it's worth considering and discussing with your clinician.
Yeah, very well said. I think it's great that there are doctors like yourself out there who are willing to be studied and versed on these medications and willing to go to the next step for a patient. I think that's awesome. I am curious to the extent that you can share, when you do or have tried this in your practice, what have you seen from an efficacy standpoint? Have you seen that even though it's a marginal increase, have you seen a stall break or somebody be able to accomplish something at that higher dose that they just weren't at the lower doses? Or what are you seeing?
It's not a silver bullet. It's not a silver bullet. Taking that extra step, it might get you another 6 to 10 pounds, and then the body accommodates. The body gets used to the new dose, and there's just to expect an 18 or 17.5 to be much different than a 15, and have the floodgates open. It's not what I've seen, and I don't think it's what one would expect, but it can push that line of scrimmage forward a little bit, as you're aiming to get further downfield in your weight loss journey. Sure.
That makes sense. I think that's a fascinating thing for some people to maybe explore conversationally with their medical providers. What about, so you had mentioned this, I'm just going through some questions that immediately pop in my head. So you talked about some people with compound, being a little bit easier to sort of titrate doses maybe outside of what is commercially available. Have you had success with any patients that have been able to get this kind of treatment covered for branded medications through their insurance? Like you're going up to, maybe you're prescribing a 17.5, like a 15 milligram pen and 2.5, or are they paying out of pocket?
Yeah, they would pay out of pocket. The pharmacies aren't going to dispense a 15 pen and any additional pen to a patient. So they end up having to pay for that second pen, or they can just edit this, sorry, blanked out for a second. Or they can top off their branded version with a small dose of compound to take them to the desired super therapeutic dose.
Yeah, very interesting. And are you primarily doing that with Tirzepatide or semaglutide, or both?
The majority of my practice is Tirzepatide. For me, I'm looking for a medication that is maximally efficacious with the lowest side effect profile. In my experience, I can take people farther from a weight loss perspective on Tirzepatide than I can on semaglutide. So the vast majority of my patients are on Tirzepatide. We have patients on branded versions, both Mounjaro and Zepbound. We have patients on compound versions. You'll see some doctors out there who are completely anti-compound. They are what I would call letter of the law sticklers, and they are not comfortable deviating from very well-established guidelines. And then you have other doctors on the other spectrum who will do whatever they can to funnel patients into compound versions because they feel it's cheaper for the patient, easier for them. There may be some sort of financial incentive on that side for the doctor. I'm not getting into that. For me, it's all about access and for the patient. So if the patient can't afford branded versions and they're unable to get a prior authorization, then I will recommend that they pursue options from a compound pharmacy. If the patient feels uncomfortable with compound pharmacies, I'm not here to make them comfortable with compound pharmacies. I let them know that branded medication is an option, and if they can't get approved for it, then it's going to come out of their pocket at a steeper price than compound versions were. So I'm all about educating. I'm all about providing access to care and helping patients achieve their goals.
Awesome. And that's just it just speaks to the compassionate nature of the way that you approach practicing medicine. I want to build on this conversation just a little bit here because I think it's timely. So some of the news that broke this week, obviously this is going to air about a week after we chatted today, but some of the news that has broken in the last 24 hours is it looks like the FDA may be capitulating to Eli Lilly's reporting of the Tirzepatide doses all being commercially available, right? So we'll sideline what we think about that conversation, but let's sort of play this out. Let's say in 2 to 3 months, there just is not the level of access to compound versions of these medications. And so you have people looking at, well, I cannot afford the branded medication. I can't afford $650 a month to stay on Tirzepatide. I would like, because I think that this is a golden opportunity, probably as people sort of look at what their options are, to take a look maybe for the first time or take a second look at surgical options, because many people have access to bariatric surgery, but they don't have access to the pharmaceutical drugs. Talk to that person for a minute.
Oh man, is this something that's like close to me? This is going to happen. It's going to happen in terms of access, whether it's because the shortage will be met and pressure will be applied to compound pharmacies and access will diminish from that lane, and people from an affordability standpoint won't be able to get the branded medication, or there will be continued demand issues putting pressure on things, and there will be continued shortages and pharmacies will run out and people who are used to getting the meds won't get it. Also, prior authorizations will continue to need to be renewed and people will get denials that had previously been approved for the medication. And what happens when your medication supply gets cut off for whatever those reasons? Reliably, you can expect weight regain. And people start to see their weight coming back to where it was. And all of a sudden, this sort of rosy hue of like, this is what I've been waiting for my whole life starts slipping away from your grasp and from your experience. And that is terrifying to patients. And I think looking at bariatric surgery in that time, before you've regained all your weight, you know, when you've gained 10 pounds back, that's the time to like really investigate the opportunities for bariatric surgery, meet with surgeons, check their credentials, and see if it's a right fit for you. Bariatric surgery is among the safest surgeries performed because in the 70s and 80s with open surgeries and sort of any general surgeon being able to perform it, it had a dicey beginning, but as minimally invasive surgery and laparoscopy took over and the American Board of Bariatric Surgery, which then became the American Board of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery, as we came to understand the impact of bariatric surgery, not just on weight, but on diabetes, on high cholesterol, and on all these other metabolic conditions. As the ASMBS started to regulate who could perform bariatric surgery, those complication rates came down and so low that it is among the safest surgeries that you could get nowadays. So I would say for someone to be open to bariatric surgery if they see their weight coming back and their opportunity to get GLP-1 medications dissipating, to be ready for that in advance. Think about it before your medications go away. And yeah, it may not be what you want to do in the face of regular, affordable medication access, but we don't know what the future holds, and understand what your options are from a weight loss surgery perspective, because getting it before you've gained an extra 50 pounds will drive you further down the weight loss path. So instead of just losing what you gained after coming off the meds, you can sort of start your point at only a 10-pound gain from your low and take it 40, 50 pounds to where you couldn't get with the medication alone.
That's awesome. So I'll give you two options here, because I know you're on tight time window here. Can you give a brief flyover of what the procedures are and who they might best fit, or just let people know where the best resource that you know of that they can go find information and start that process today?
Yeah, I'll break it down pretty quick from my perspective, what's out there. So let's start at the least invasive and move on to the most invasive. So from my perspective, the least invasive would be the intragastric balloons. These are modified breast implants or some sort of expandable or inflatable device that you swallow into your stomach. It stays there for 6 to 12 months. You lose weight during that time, typically 25, 30 pounds, and then it gets deflated and pulled back out. Or in some instances, you poop them out. I do not offer these in my practice anymore, because the notion of 30 pounds of weight loss over 6 months, and even more so over 12 months, just doesn't compete with GLP-1 medications. And the price of the balloon at $9,000 or $8,000 to $10,000, even if you're paying out of pocket monthly $1,000, you could expect in 6 months spending $6,000 that you would lose 25 to 30 pounds on a GLP-1 medication. So it's hard for me to offer that to patients. If they were really against any type of hormonal injection, but they were willing to have 2 anesthesias, one to put it in and one to take it out, or at a minimum 1 anesthesia to have a balloon put in and taken out, then in that rare case, I would offer it to a patient. Then there are newer minimally invasive things, what we would call endoscopic procedures. These are still somewhat experimental, but they are looking at putting a sleeve, like a impermeable plastic barrier at the end of your stomach to line your duodenum and the first part of your intestine. And what that does is that prevents anything you eat from stimulating the cells in that portion of the intestine and being absorbed by that portion of the intestine. So it actually functions like a gastric bypass, because the food doesn't stimulate the cells or start being absorbed till downstream in the intestines. And there's shown some promise for diabetes improvement, for weight loss, for GLP-1 activation endogenously with these type of sleeve implants, but do
they stay in there forever, or are they temporary?
Right. So the problem becomes there are problems if a foreign body stays in forever like that. You can have erosions where the sleeve opening, like that hole at the end of your stomach, is anchored into the bottom of the stomach. They're usually like metal tines or plastic hooks that hold it. Over time, those can cause erosions and mucosal injury. So typically they're not intended to be left in forever. If you have something that grows into the wall of the intestine, that can cause migration and all types of problems. So the nut hasn't entirely been cracked on those. Another investigational similar technique is to burn the mucosal lining of the duodenum so that those cells become inactivated from an absorptive capacity, again, allowing nutrients to flow further downstream. And there's been some data that improves diabetes control and has some weight loss associated with, but those things are all very early. So in terms of the standard surgeries, we go back to the band as the next most invasive, less so than a sleeve bypass or a duodenal switch. So the band, the story for 10 years has been as plugged in bariatric surgeons who have the capacity to do complex operations, we take out more bands than we put in. So I really don't offer bands in my practice anymore. It's suboptimal weight loss. The complications over time where we have to take them out are prohibitive in my opinion. If someone is saying the only thing I will consider is a band, then I will put it in because it's better than nothing. But as a rule, I don't recommend adjustable gastric banding. I don't really put in bands anymore in my practice. So I would kind of keep that off to the side if you're really serious about exploring bariatric surgery options. The next thing from an invasive standpoint would be a sleeve gastrectomy. And you can Google animations on it or pictures on it. But in essence, a sleeve gastrectomy is trimming the majority of, I always forget, I'm always backwards in terms of what side it is because I'm reversed. But
you did this last time. You're like, I promise I know where the liver is.
right. It's very confusing for me. So you're taking the outer half, or frankly, the outer 4/5 of the stomach from a capacity perspective. You're resecting about 75 to 80%, sometimes a little more, of the volume that the stomach can accommodate by removing what we call the greater curvature and the majority of the body of the stomach and leaving people with a thin sleeve of stomach, a sleeve like the hollow tube here, that's what you're left with, to hold food. And that prevents the stomach from mechanically grinding the food to a smaller, more easily absorbed substance. So things enter the intestines in a more whole, unbroken down state, which means it has less surface area for enzymes to interact on it. It takes longer for it to get broken down. It makes its way further down the intestinal tract, stimulating GLP-1, peptide YY, and all those hindgut fullness hormones. So sleeve is both restricted because you can't put so much in that stomach, and hormonal, hindgut activating that you see with the bypass operation without doing a bypass. So I love a sleeve. It's a great first stage operation, even if you're extremely overweight in the super morbid obese BMI categories, like 50 and above. It's a great way to get someone down to a lower BMI, like in the mid 30s. And then some people can continue down to there and other people will stall out and start to go up. And those are good candidates for a duodenal switch, a bypass operation on top of a sleeve. So then there's the gastric bypass and a duodenal switch. The only difference between them is a duodenal switch is an intestinal bypass done on top of a sleeve gastrectomy, meaning at the end of the sleeve, at the start of the duodenum. That's where you reroute the intestines and plug the downstream intestines into the end of that sleeve at the duodenum. And a gastric bypass is creating a small pouch of stomach about the size of an egg and then plugging downstream intestines into that. And then the beginnings of the intestines plug back in to that downstream intestine to bring all of the liver enzymes and pancreatic juices to digest the food in what's called the common channel downstream. Now, historically, there are different limb lengths in these two parts of the intestine. That's why it's a Y, because they're like two parts that then come to one. That's why it's called a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. And a duodenal switch historically has that same Roux-en-Y reconstruction. So different surgeons do different limb lengths, and there's pros and cons to that, but that's sort of outside the scope of this discussion. So that's a brief overview of what's out there in terms of bariatric surgery options, but there's lots of information online that you can get about these different operations. It could be a good question to ask ChatGPT to break down, but at the end of the day, it's something you really want to discuss with a knowledgeable bariatric surgeon.
Yeah. Your website, I imagine, has some resources that people can look at.
Of course. WeightZen.com has a lot of information about the different surgeries we perform in our practice. I had a lot of interesting content on TikTok, which I took down when everyone was getting banned, but we're going to start putting some of that back up, especially bariatric surgery specific stuff, which I think hasn't necessarily been targeted. But yeah, there's lots of information on our website and on our social media. Dr. Daniel Rosen is my handle on all the various social medias. But I think it's such an interesting time. It's such an evolving time. First, people thought bariatric surgery was dead. Now some people are thinking it's going to come back. But again, like you said so appropriately, the medications are going to keep getting better. So who knows what the future will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in the interim, until those drugs are here and readily available, we need to be informed and educated on what the other options are, because as we sit here, bariatric surgery is still the most effective way to deal with obesity by the numbers. And
the gold standard.
Yeah, the gold standard. And I think that most people, I mean, it seems like the insurance companies are sort of jumping at covering bariatric surgery now, because they're looking down the pike at a $1,500 a month medication and going, why don't we just spring for the $20,000 surgery or whatever it is? I don't, depending on what.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for that to be the case, because since I've been a bariatric surgeon, which is now approaching 15 years, the biggest problem was insurance approval. Bariatric surgery is held to this standard that no other surgery is held to, where you need to get a psych clearance, you need to get 6 months of monthly visits, all of these roadblocks and hoops that patients have to jump through in order to get their surgery approved that you don't have to do to get a breast reduction or a anti-reflux surgery for heartburn, to get your gallbladder removed, to get a tummy tuck, which sometimes is not covered by insurance, obviously, so it's not exactly the same. But there's an entire slew of surgeries that are beneficial to patients, non-emergent, but provide huge health benefits, like bariatric surgery, few of which are frankly as impactful as bariatric surgery to the patient's health and to their overall long-term healthcare costs in terms of driving them down. But insurance companies put up a lot of roadblocks because they know obesity is such a huge problem. They can't handle the resource outflow that agreeing to hundreds of thousands of bariatric surgery or millions of bariatric surgeries to their clients or to their members will impact their bottom line. And because people change insurances so much, the companies tend to be resistant to provide cost savings to their competitors by fronting the cash for the surgery and seeing the patients leave. Very myopic view, very small-minded view. And hopefully, one of the unintended consequences of GLP-1 medications is dropping these frankly biased and discriminatory policies that these insurance companies had to limit the care for obese patients and open up the field to bariatric surgery for those who qualify.
Yeah, 100%. I'm skeptical whether that will be the case, because I think you're seeing very similar track taken by insurance companies right now in PBM saying, yeah, great, we'll put you on a GLP-1, we'll send you a scale, you'll weigh yourself every day, you'll participate in our program, you'll do this, all these hoops that of course they don't make people jump through for their heart medication or their smoking cessation stuff or whatever. But when it comes to obesity, it's just, again, it's a double standard. This was an excellent conversation, Dr. Rosen. I'm so grateful that you were able to and willing to give some of your time to the channel today. Remind everybody once more where the best place to find you is and what your handles are, and we'll make sure we drop them in the video description too.
Yeah, Dr. Daniel Rosen. If you want to find me, that's Dr. Daniel Rosen. And weightzen.com is our website. And for those who have hernias, obviously we fix a lot of hernias, and people who are obese have a lot of hernias because the intra-abdominal pressure that's generated from so much fat inside their abdominal cavity, putting strain on their belly buttons, on their groins, on their diaphragms, and getting all types of hernias. We fix a lot of hernias laparoscopically and robotically as well. That's at New York Hernia Center. So those are our websites and our handles. come check us out. Message us if you feel like you have questions you want to be asked. If you have questions you want to be answered directly, I always try and respond to people in any way I can be helpful. So this has been a pleasure and an honor for me. I love getting a chance to hang out with you, Dave. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rosen. Really appreciate you. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll do it again.
Totally, dude. See you soon.
All right, take care. Dr. Daniel Rosen, back to On the Pen. I hope that you found that discussion super helpful. I'm sure that you did, especially for those of you who are losing access or live in that world of the perpetual anxiety about, will I have access to compound medications next month? You know, one way to alleviate all of that stress is just to take a more serious look at the options that are out there for bariatric surgery. And I highly recommend that you look to Dr. Daniel Rosen and his Weight Zen practice for more information on that. Thank you again to Dr. Rosen for joining the stream tonight. Let him know, give him some love in the chat. Let him know that you're thankful that he gave some of his time to us tonight. Dr. Daniel Rosen, a world-renowned bariatric surgeon out of New York City, and his second appearance on the Pen. Such a delightful conversation. Dr. Rosen is one of those doctors that I am drawn to because Dr. Rosen is extremely compassionate. He's extremely well-versed in all areas of obesity medicine, and I am just thrilled that he wanted to come back and lend some of his time to the stream tonight. If you enjoyed Dr. Rosen, give him some love in the chat. Of course, as he mentioned, he's available at DR for Dr. Daniel Rosen over on TikTok, and then weightzen.com. You can find more information about his bariatric surgery program, again, out of New York City. So if you're up in that area, Dr. Daniel Rosen, you've got to check him out. Such a good guy. Hey, a little bit of news that broke a little bit earlier. I didn't catch it until during that interview there. But the longshoremen that were striking on the East Coast, that was a strike of the ports, basically shut down the ports from Maine all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico and Texas. Half of the ports in the United States were shut down. That strike has apparently been resolved. So obviously it sounded like there were implications for both semaglutide and Tirzepatide for Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly respectively. If you were relying on that to affect the shortages, as we spent so much time talking about earlier on in the stream, that was resolved. This is great news for the United States. This is great news for the accessibility of all of the many, many things that we rely on overseas, not just GLP-1s. GLP-1s are very low on the totem pole of the things that this could have impacted and made a huge negative difference in the country. So that is really, really good news. So congratulations to the longshoremen for resolving that strike. And congratulations to the United States. Yeah, no more toilet paper panic buying. Although, you know, who knows? Maybe people will continue to freak out for a couple more days. But that's good news. Dr. Rosen was so great. You all have been and always are so great. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button before we leave. Such a great conversation with Dr. Rosen. I expected nothing less than him. Really interesting conversation about megadosing. Some of his patients who are slower responders, of course, as a slower responder to these medications, you know, that conversation interested me a whole lot. Of course, we'll need to have him back. So thank you. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for hanging out with us tonight. It was such a great show. A lot of stuff transpired this week, and we probably got into the weeds a little bit more than I intended to at the outset. So I apologize for that. Hopefully it didn't detract from the people who stuck around to hear from Dr. Daniel Rosen, who had such great information to bring us. Spoonie just gifted 5 memberships. Thank you, Spoonie. That is so kind and generous of you. The gifts that you all give is always appreciated, but it's never expected. I really, really, really thank you for that. Candy with the super sticker. Really appreciate that as well. Very kind, very generous of you all. But yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do at On the Pen. Of course, this is the time where I let you all know that I wish nothing but the best for each and every one of you. I pray that the Lord may bless you and keep you, cause his face to shine upon each and every one of you, and be so gracious to you this week until we meet again. Thank you for being the best part of what we do. Have a great week. Thanks for being here with me. Thank you, Dr. Payne. Don't forget to join us on the Discord. The Discord conversation continues. Make sure that you join us over there. You're missing out on this. You are missing out.